I have carried 41 people out of burning buildings in 18 years. I remember every single one of their faces, but there's one I carried out who I never expected to see again. And when she walked back into my life 2 years later, she was holding a photograph of me she'd kept on her refrigerator the whole time, and she said she'd been looking for me since the night I saved her. Before I tell you what happened next and how my little boy is the reason I almost didn't open the door, do me one favor. If you believe that the person you save can turn out to be the person who saves you, then hit that subscribe button right now, because this story runs straight through the fire and comes out the other side. Stay with me. My name is Damon Wells. I'm 37 years old. I'm built like the job made me, and I've been a firefighter since I was 19, which is more than half my life spent running toward the thing everybody else runs away from. My father was a firefighter and his father before him, and I never once considered doing anything else, never wanted to. Some men are born restless and never find the thing that settles them. I found mine early. There is a particular kind of quiet that comes over me the moment the alarm hits and the truck rolls out. A stillness in the middle of all that noise and speed, and I have chased that stillness my whole adult life. My grandma used to say I was the only child she ever knew who got calmer when things got worse. She said it like it worried her. It probably should have. I married young, too young. Probably a woman named Tasha, who I loved with everything a 23-year-old knows how to love, with which turns out to be a lot, but not always enough. We had a son, Jalen, and Jalen was and is the best thing I have ever done with my life, better than any rescue, better than any medal. But the marriage didn't hold. It wasn't dramatic. There was no villain. Tasha just needed a partner who came home the same man who left, and the job doesn't always let you do that. You carry things out of those buildings that you can't put down. And after a while, I stopped being able to explain to her what I was carrying, and she stopped being able to live with the not knowing, and we ended it as kindly as two people can end a thing that mattered. She moved across the country for work when Jalen was 4, and by a decision we made together, Jalen stayed with me. She's a good mother, and she calls and she visits, but the day-to-day of raising my son fell to me, and I have never once been sorry it did. So I became a single father and a firefighter at the same time, and if you've never tried to do both, I'll tell you it's a particular kind of impossible. I worked 24-hour shifts. I traded and begged and built a whole fragile scaffolding of neighbors and my sister and a wonderful retired school teacher named Miss Pearl, who lived 2 doors down and treated Jalen like her own grandbaby. I coached his little league team on my days off, half asleep. I learned to braid nothing, but I learned to make pancakes shaped like whatever animal he asked for. And underneath all of it, I carried a fear I never said out loud, the specific fear of every single parent firefighter, which is what happens to my boy if I run into the wrong building on the wrong day and don't run back out. I'd made Miss Pearl and my sister promise. I'd signed the papers. But you can't sign away that fear. It rode in the truck with me on every call. I'll tell you what the days actually looked like, because people romanticize single fatherhood and they romanticize firefighting, and the truth of doing both at once is mostly just exhaustion held together with love. I'd come off a 24-hour shift at 7 in the morning, having slept maybe 2 hours, having maybe watched a house or a life burn down, and I'd drive straight to Miss Pearl's to pick up Jalen, and I would not let myself lie down, because if I lay down, I'd lose the whole day with my son, so I'd make the pancakes, the animal-shaped ones, and I'd take him to the park, and I'd coach the Little League practice running on nothing, and I'd fall asleep sitting up on the bleachers between innings, and Jalen would wake me by tugging my sleeve, not upset, used to it, saying, "Dad, it's my turn to bat watch," and I'd watch. I never missed him bat. I missed a lot of things, sleep chief among them, but I never once missed my son at bat, because I decided early that whatever else the job took from me, it wasn't going to take that. Miss Pearl used to tell me I was going to run myself into the ground. I told her a man can rest when his kid is grown. She'd shake her head and pack me a plate anyway. Jalen knew what I did. That was the hard part of it. Other kids' dads went to offices. My son knew from the time he could understand words that his father's job was to go into the places that were on fire, and that some of the people who did that job didn't come home because he'd been to the funerals, small and solemn in a borrowed tie holding my hand. He never said he was scared. But he had a ritual every single time I left for a shift. He'd make me promise the same words every time: come back out, not come home, come back out. He'd heard me use the phrase about the guys, whether they came back out of a building, and he'd made it into a spell. and I said it back to him every time. I'll come back out, I promise, and I meant it with everything I had, and I also knew it was the one promise in the world I couldn't actually guarantee, and so did he, young as he was. And we made it to each other anyway, because sometimes a promise is just love, wearing the only clothes it has. Now I have to tell you about the night, because everything comes from the night. It was February, bitter cold, and we got a call at 2 in the morning for a residential fire, an old converted house divided into apartments, the kind of building that's a death trap by design. One staircase, no sprinklers, doors that lead to more doors. By the time we got there, the second floor was fully involved, flames coming out the windows, and the reports were that everyone was out. And then a neighbor grabbed my captain's arm and said, "No, the girl in 2C, she's still in there. She never came out." I went in. That's the job. But I'll tell you what going in is actually like, because it's not like the movies. It's dark. That's the thing nobody expects. A house on fire isn't bright. It's black, thick smoke so complete that my helmet light bounced back at me and showed me nothing, and so you go by feel, by the wall, by the heat gradient, by counting doors. The fire was above me and behind the walls, roaring like a living animal, and the heat came in waves that you feel through the gear as pressure more than temperature, and every instinct a body has is screaming at you to turn around, and the whole skill of the job, the entire thing they train into you for years, is learning to keep moving forward through a wall of instinct built by a million years of evolution telling you to flee. I counted doors down that hallway. I kept one glove on the wall. And that stillness came over me, the one my grandmother worried about, and in the middle of all that roar and dark, I got very, very calm. I went up a staircase that was already breathing fire, and I found 2C, and I found her. A young woman unconscious on the floor of a smoke-filled bedroom, having gotten almost to the window before the smoke took her. She was maybe 25, and she was small, and she was not breathing well, and I did the thing I've done 40 other times. I got low, and I got her over my shoulder, and I carried her down a staircase that was actively trying to kill both of us, out into the freezing air, and I laid her on the frozen grass, and the medics took over, and she started breathing. Really breathing. And then they loaded her into an ambulance, and it drove away, and that was that. That's how it usually ends. You save them, and they disappear into the medical system, and you never learn their name or whether they had kids or what they did for a living, or if they made it ultimately all the way. You just carry them out and let them go. 41 times I've let them go, but I never forgot her face. I want to be honest about that because it's the whole hinge of the story. Something about her stayed with me, some quality, even in that unconscious face on the frozen grass. And for 2 years, every so often I'd wonder about the girl from 2C, whether she'd made it, whether she was okay. I never tried to find out. We're not supposed to. There are rules, and there are also just walls you build to survive a job like mine. You cannot carry 41 faces and also follow all of them home. So I let her go like all the rest. I just let her go slower. Her name, it turned out, was Sarah Delaney, and 2 years after the night I carried her out of that burning building, she found me. It happened at, of all places, a fire station open house, the kind of community day where we let kids climb on the truck and spray the hose, and we hand out plastic helmets and talk about smoke detectors. Jalen, who was 7 by then, loved these days, got to show off that his dad was the guy in charge of the coolest truck in the world. And I was standing by the engine helping a kid work the hose when I looked up, and there was a young woman standing at the edge of the crowd, just standing there, staring at me with tears running down her face and not making any move to wipe them. I didn't recognize her. Of course I didn't. The only time I'd seen her face, it had been slack and gray and unconscious in the smoke. But she recognized me because she'd spent 2 years looking. She walked up to me, and her hands were shaking, and she held out a photograph. It was a picture of me in my gear. My face mostly hidden, being handed something by another firefighter taken by a neighbor with a phone on the night of the fire and posted online. The only image that existed of the man who'd carried her out. She said she'd printed it and kept it on her refrigerator for 2 years. And then she said, "I've been trying to find you for 2 years. I called the department a dozen times and they wouldn't give me a name. Privacy rules, they said. I came to every open house at every station in the city. I just needed to tell you." And she stopped because she was crying too hard, and then she got it out. "You carried me out of that building. I woke up in the hospital and they told me a firefighter went up a staircase that collapsed 10 minutes later and carried me out over his shoulder. I was pregnant, and I didn't know it yet 6 weeks. You didn't just save me, you saved my daughter. Her name is Lily. She's a year old. And I have spent 2 years needing to look you in the eye and say thank you, and I couldn't even find out your name." I did not know what to say. I have been thanked before, but not like this, not by someone who'd carried my anonymous face on her refrigerator for 2 years. Not by someone telling me I'd saved a child who hadn't even existed yet on the night I went up those stairs. And my Jalen was standing next to me holding the fire hose listening to all of it, and he looked up at this crying stranger and he said, with the simple certainty of a 7-year-old, "My dad saves people. That's just what he does." And Sarah Delaney laughed through her tears and crouched down to his level and said, I know he does. He saved me." That should have been the end of it. A beautiful moment, a thank you 2 years in the making, and then we go our separate ways, the saved and the saver. And I want to tell you why it wasn't the end, and it's not a flattering reason, so I'll be honest. I almost let it be the end. Sarah, standing there gathering herself, said she'd love to have me over for dinner sometime, her and Lily, to properly thank me, and I heard myself start to say no. Not because I didn't want to, because I did, and that scared me. Because since Tasha, I'd built my whole life around Jalen and the job and nothing else, no room for anything that could hurt, and a young mother with a baby and tears on her face and a photograph of me on her refrigerator was exactly the kind of thing that could rearrange a man's whole careful life, and I had learned to be afraid of anything that could rearrange me. It was Jalen who opened the door I was trying to close, because after Sarah left, my son looked up at me and said, "Are we going to go to the dinner? She has a baby." I've never had a baby to play with. And there was something in how he said it. Some hunger I hadn't noticed, and I realized my son, raised by a firefighter and a rotating cast of kind neighbors, was lonely in a way I'd been too busy to see. He wanted a bigger family. He'd never said so, because he was a good kid who never wanted to make my life harder, same as Sarah's daughter had been saved before she was born, same as all the important things in this story that were true before anyone said them out loud. So I called Sarah back and I said yes to dinner, and I did it for my son, and I told myself that was the only reason, and it was not the only reason, and Jalen probably knew that before I did. That first dinner was awkward in the specific way of two guarded people who both feel something and are both determined not to show it. Sarah had cooked too much food, nervous, and Lily threw peas, and Jalen, who had never had a baby to be around, was so delighted by the pea throwing that he started throwing them back, and within 10 minutes both kids were shrieking with laughter, and there were peas everywhere, and Sarah and I looked at each other across the wreckage of her carefully planned dinner and just started laughing too, the kind of helpless laughing you can't stop. And the awkwardness broke like a fever. By the end of the night, the two kids were asleep in a pile, and Sarah and I were talking in low voices over cold coffee. And I noticed I didn't want to leave, and I noticed she wasn't asking me to, and I noticed both of those things with a kind of quiet alarm, because I'd forgotten what it felt like to not want to leave somewhere. That first dinner turned into a second and 100 after that. Here's what I learned about Sarah Delaney over those dinners. She was raising Lily alone. Lily's father had left the moment he found out about the pregnancy cleared out while Sarah was still in the hospital recovering from the smoke, which meant that the same fire that nearly killed her had also in its way shown her exactly who was going to stay and who was going to run. Sarah had rebuilt her whole life from that hospital bed. She'd lost her apartment and everything in it to the fire, and she'd been pregnant and alone and homeless for a stretch, and she had, with nothing but her own spine, put herself back together, found work, found a small place, raised a daughter. She was, without any exaggeration, the toughest person I've ever met, and I've worked 18 years alongside people who run into fires. Sarah ran into something harder. She ran into being alone and scared and responsible for a new life with no truck and no crew and no one coming to carry her out, and she carried herself. She told me one night how close it had come. There had been a stretch when Lily was a newborn, when Sarah had been living in her car. A thing she said in the same flat, steady voice. She said everything, no self-pity in it at all, which somehow made it worse. She'd park outside a 24-hour laundromat because it was warm and lit and safe, and she'd nurse Lily in the back seat, and she'd tell herself it was temporary, and she'd looked at my photograph on the little visor mirror where she'd taped it, and she'd made herself a promise. I promised Lily. She told me that I was going to be the person who ran toward her every single day no matter what, because that's what somebody did for us once. I couldn't be a firefighter, but I could be that. I could be the one who doesn't leave. And she'd clawed her way out of that car and into a job and into an apartment one impossible week at a time, and she'd done it all with a newborn on her hip and a stranger's photograph as her only evidence that the world contained people who show up. I have run into 41 burning buildings. I have never once done anything as brave as what that woman did in the back of a car outside a laundromat alone, keeping a promise to a baby too young to remember it. "You want to know the thing I never told anybody?" she said to me one night after Lily and Jalen were both asleep on the couch in a pile. "For 2 years I wasn't really looking for you to say thank you. I mean, I was, but it was more than that. That night when I woke up in the hospital and they told me a man I'd never met went up a collapsing staircase for a stranger, it was the first time in my whole life I believed that people would show up for me. My own father never did. Lily's father sure didn't. And then this stranger, this man whose face I'd never even seen, ran into a fire for me, for no reason except that I was inside it. I kept your picture on my refrigerator for 2 years. Damon and I looked at it every single morning, and it wasn't about you, really, no offense. It was proof. Proof that somebody somewhere would run toward me. I needed to believe that to keep going. You were my proof." I did not have words for that. I've thought about it every day since. All those years, and I'd been afraid of the exact thing this woman had built her survival around, the idea that I was someone who showed up. She'd hung her whole recovery on it. And here I was, so scared of being rearranged that I'd nearly said no to dinner. But I have to tell you about the second fire because a happy ending. You didn't have to run back into the burning building, for isn't worth telling. It was almost a year later. Sarah and I were together by then, quietly, carefully, both of us gun-shy, and taking it slow, our 2 kids already acting like siblings. And there was a fire. Not a stranger's this time, an electrical fire in Sarah's apartment building in the middle of the afternoon while I was on shift, and by a coincidence, I still can't fully make peace with my station, was the one that caught the call. I heard the address come over the radio, and my blood turned to ice water because I knew that address. I'd had dinner at that address 100 times. And Sarah was home that afternoon, and Lily was home. And this time the person in the building wasn't a stranger whose face I'd forget. This time it was them. I have gone into 41 fires with that stillness my grandmother worried about, that calm that comes over me when everyone else panics. I did not have it that day. I had the exact opposite. I had the thing I'd feared my whole career. The personal fear finally made real. And I went up those stairs, not like a professional, but like a terrified man. And my captain was screaming at me to slow down and follow protocol, and I could not hear him over my own heart. And I got to Sarah's door, and it was hot, and I kicked it in, and the apartment was full of smoke. And it was empty. The bedroom was empty. The kitchen was empty. And in that instant, every terrible thing I had ever carried out of a building, all 41 faces came back at once, because an empty apartment in a fire means either everyone got out or nobody got low enough in time, and I did not know which. And the not knowing is a thing I would not wish on my worst enemy. I have been calm in 41 fires. In that second, I made a sound inside my mask that I have never made before or since. For one horrible second, I thought the worst. And then I heard through the smoke coming from the bathroom a child crying, and I found them, Sarah, on the floor of the bathroom with the door shut and wet towels jammed under it, holding Lily and Jalen both. Because Jalen had been there that afternoon too, a school holiday, and Sarah had done everything right. Everything I'd ever taught her without even meaning to teach her. She'd gotten low. She'd sealed the room. She'd protected the children with her own body, and she was conscious, and they were all breathing. And she looked up at me in my mask and my gear, and she said in a voice I will hear until the day I die, "I knew you'd come." I told them Daddy would come. I got them out one at a time, and I want to tell you the specific thing about carrying my own family out of a fire, because it is different. It is a completely different thing from carrying a stranger. When you carry a stranger, you carry them carefully, professionally, correctly. When you carry your own son down a burning staircase, you carry him like he is made of everything you have ever loved, and the whole time a voice in your head is saying, "Please, please, please," a prayer with no words in it, and your training keeps your feet moving down the stairs while your heart does something the training has no protocol for at all. I carried Jalen first, then Lily, then I went back a third time for Sarah, who could have walked but who I would not let walk, who I carried out myself over the same shoulder I'd carried her out on 2 years before, in the same building's twin, in a symmetry so perfect I didn't notice it until later. And when I set her down on the grass, she put her hand flat against my chest against the gear. The way you'd put your hand on someone's heart, and she just left it there, and neither of us said anything, because there wasn't anything that needed saying that a hand on a heart didn't already say. And then I heard through the smoke coming from the bathroom a child crying, and I found them Sarah on the floor of the bathroom with the door shut and wet towels jammed under it, holding Lily and Jalen both. Because Jalen had been there that afternoon too, a school holiday, and Sarah had done everything right. Everything I'd ever taught her without even meaning to teach her. She'd gotten low. She'd sealed the room. She'd protected the children with her own body, and she was conscious, and they were all breathing, and she looked up at me in my mask and my gear, and she said in a voice I will hear until the day I die, "I knew you'd come." I told them Daddy would come. Daddy. She said Daddy. Not Damon, about my role in Jalen's life and in that moment in Lily's. She'd told the children that I would come, and I'd come, and I carried all three of them out, one after another, down a staircase for the 42nd, 43rd, and 44th times. Except these three faces, I would never let go of these three I was carrying out to keep. We were all okay. Smoke a few burns a night in the hospital for observation, but okay. And in that hospital, the same kind of hospital where Sarah had woken up 2 years before and decided to believe that people would show up for her. I sat with the three of them, and Lily, not even 3 yet, fell asleep on my chest, and Jalen held Sarah's hand, and Sarah looked at me over our tangle of children and said, "Okay, I think we're done taking it slow. I think we've established that you'll run into a burning building for us. That's basically the whole test, isn't it? You already passed it twice." There was a moment that night in the hospital that I've never told anyone, but that changed how I understood my whole life. Jalen, my son, exhausted, smoke still in his hair, leaned against me and said quietly, "Dad, you came back out, and you brought them out too." And I realized that my son, who for years had made me promise to come back out, had just watched me not only come back out, but come back out carrying the 2 people who had become, without any of us quite deciding it, his family. The spell had held, and it had held for more than just me. I held my boy against my side in that hospital room, and I understood that the fear I'd carried in the truck for 18 years, the fear of what happens to my son if I don't come back out, had quietly transformed into something else. It wasn't just Jalen who needed me to come back out now, it was 4 of us. And somehow that made the fear smaller instead of bigger, because a man who has 4 reasons to come back out is a man who has 4 reasons to be careful. And I had spent too long being a man with only 1. I asked her to marry me right there in the hospital, no ring, smelling like smoke, and she said yes before I finished asking. We were married in the spring outside in a park with both kids in the wedding. Jalen is my best man, and Lily is the flower girl who ate most of the flowers. My whole crew came in their dress uniforms. The men and women I'd run into fires beside for 18 years, and my captain, the one who'd screamed at me to slow down on the day of the second fire, stood up during the toasts and told the story of watching me abandon 18 years of training and protocol to go up those stairs like a rookie, and he said, "In 18 years, I never once saw Damon Wells scared. Not once. That man's got ice in his veins, everybody knows it." And then I watched him lose his mind completely, going up a staircase toward a woman and 2 kids, and I thought, well, there it is. Somebody finally got to him. Somebody finally gave that man something worth being scared of. And the whole crew laughed, and Sarah cried, and I didn't bother pretending my own eyes were dry. Miss Pearl was there too in the front row, the retired school teacher who'd helped me raise my son. And when I hugged her, she held my face in her 2 hands the way my grandmother used to and said, "You finally let somebody carry you for a change." And she was right. That was the thing I'd never understood about my whole life of carrying people out. I'd built an entire identity around being the one who runs and the one who carries, the one who saves. And it had never once occurred to me that the reason I'd stayed so alone was that I'd never let anybody carry me. Sarah did. Sarah had been carrying me on a visor mirror and a refrigerator door for 2 years before I even knew her name. Sarah kept the photograph, the one from her refrigerator, my masked face on the night of the first fire, and she had it framed, and it hangs in our hallway now, and Lily is old enough now to ask about it, and Sarah tells her the story, the true one. That before Lily was even born, a stranger ran into a fire and carried her mother out, and that the stranger turned out to be her dad, and that this is proof. The kind of proof you can hang on a wall that some people run toward you, and that Lily gets to grow up already knowing what it took her mother 25 years to learn. I still work the job. Sarah made her peace with it in a way Tasha never could, and I think it's because Sarah knows the job from the inside. Now knows what it means to be the one inside the building, praying someone comes, and she's decided she'd rather be married to one of the people who comes even with all the fear that carries. Jalen is 10 now and says he wants to be a firefighter, and part of me wants to talk him out of it. And part of me understands that some things run in the blood like a river, and you don't dam a river, you just teach it. Lily is 5 and tells everyone at school that her dad saved her before she was born, and the teachers think it's a sweet story a child made up. And it is not made up. It is the truest thing in our whole family. 41 faces I carried out and let go. And one of them came back 2 years later, holding a photograph to tell me that the saving went both ways, that the night I thought I was just doing my job, I was actually walking into the rest of my life, that the girl I carried out of the fire had been carrying me on her refrigerator the whole time, keeping me the way I'd kept her face without knowing why. My grandmother worried that I got calmer when things got worse. She never lived to see the day I lost that calm completely going up a staircase toward the 3 people I loved most in the world. But I think she'd understand. The calm was for strangers. You're allowed to be terrified for your own. If you made it all the way here, then you already know this was never really a story about fire. It was a story about proof, about the way we all need evidence that someone will run toward us, and about how sometimes we're carrying that proof for someone else without even knowing it. So before you go, do this one thing for me. If there is someone in your life who ran toward you when they could have run away, who showed up when your own experience had taught you nobody would put their name in the comments, just the name, let them be your proof out loud for 1 second in a place they'll never see. And if this story reached you, subscribe and stay with me, because I have more of them. True ones, hard ones, stories about the people who run toward the fire and the people they carry out, and the strange grace of not knowing in the moment that you're saving your own future. The next one begins the way all the good ones do, with someone standing at the edge of something burning, deciding whether to go in. Because that, it turns out, is almost always the exact moment the rest of your life is waiting on the other side of.